Hi everyone, this is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here tonight to film another tag video. I am really trying to be proactive with my tags, and so I'm just gonna roll right through some of these tags in the next few weeks, I think, if I can. So this tag today is the Evita Book Tag. This is an original tag created by Just One Reader, and I was tagged by Anna Bailey Karras. I will link both of their videos down below so that you can check them out, and I am going to just get into these questions. So this tag is a series of 6 prompts that were based on operas, I believe. Now, I don't know anything about operas. I'm pretty much complete dummy when it comes to such things. But I have decided to try to answer all of these prompts with a nonfiction book, just because I love nonfiction and I don't think it gets talked about enough in these tags. So here we go. Question 1, Oh, What a Circus, a book in which death propels the story forward. And for this one, I have picked Another Day in the Death of America by Gary Younge. Gary Younge is a British journalist. I think he writes for The Guardian. I'm not for sure which newspaper he writes for, but he is a British journalist, and he came to the United States and was appalled by the gun violence in the United States. And so he picks a day, one date, November 23rd, 2013, and he writes about all of the deaths of young people on that one particular day in the United States from gun violence. And so he basically chronicles the lives of 10 young people who died from gun violence on that one particular day. You can see that I tabbed the heck out of this book. It is heartbreaking and super fascinating and not at all what you would expect. The reasons why these children are killed do not always fall into the popular narratives of why people are killed by guns. And so I found it really, really fascinating, and I learned a lot from this book, and I was also had my heart broken by it. Excellent read, would highly recommend. Okay, number 2, Buenos Aires, a book in which setting or atmosphere plays a central role. And for that, I have picked this older nonfiction. This is Kontiki. It's written by Thor Heyerdahl. And this is a science adventure book. I read this, probably at least 20 years ago. And it's basically the story of this one scientist who is trying to prove how South Seas Islanders were peopled by folks from Peru. So he builds a raft and he tries to sail from Peru to some Polynesian islands. And it's all about how people could have traveled on the ocean in these very primitive vessels without use of any compass, GPS, any of that sort of stuff. This actually takes place, this is a much older book. This was originally published, let's see if I can find the pub date here. This was originally published in 1950. So, you know, this was back before any of our modern scientific instrumentation for sailing on the ocean or anything like that. So it's got pictures in it. You can see this little raft that they're putting together. And not only is he have to deal with how to navigate in the way that peoples would have navigated back in ancient times, but he has to survive as far as like food and water and all that stuff goes as well. So pretty fascinating. Here's a picture of the craft. I thought this was a really exciting and super page-turning adventure story, and I really enjoyed it very much, and I would highly recommend this as well. Question 3, A New Argentina, a book revolving around power and politics. I chose this book, Five Presidents by Clint Hill with Lisa McCubbin. This is My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. I read this last year as a buddy read with Patrice, and this is all about Clint Hill, who is pictured here. He was a Secret Service agent under 5 presidents, and this is his story of what it was like to protect and serve in each of those 5 administrations, which were very, very different from one another. And this is really fascinating. Hill kept, evidently he must have kept really detailed notes on things like what kind of cars the president was driven around in, and like really detailed information about like where they stayed when they went places and what they ate, how big the crowds were. What kind of materials are used to build the cars that the presidents ride in, and all that sort of stuff. This is definitely written in a very what's the word I want? It's written in a way that's very engaging, and it's also very accessible to any person. It's not. It's about the politics, but it's not highly politicized, because Clint Hill obviously served under, both Democrats and Republicans, and he does not interject his politics into this, but you do get to see some of the political machinations of each of these presidents. And the section about Kennedy is just, heartbreaking. So good. Question 4. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, a classic book. So for this one, I couldn't resist. I had to pick Darwin. And this is my copy of his collected works. But I would recommend specifically from Darwin On the Origin of the Species, because you can't really read or understand about how we think about evolution and biology today without understanding Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection. I first read this, I read excerpts of this in high school, but then I had to read the entirety of On the Origin of Species when I was in college, and Darwin was a surprisingly good writer. Like, for a guy who wrote back in the 1800s, it is really accessible and really fascinating. You can see that I highlighted sections of this from when I was in class. I've got underlines in here. I've got notes to myself in the margins. I just found it absolutely fascinating. And after you read On the Origin of Species, you should read his treatise on the Galapagos Islands, because that is also fascinating. Let's see, what is that? I think that's the one about his voyages on the Beagle, which was the name of the ship that he went on when he went to the Galapagos Islands. Super fascinating guy, really deep thinker. Our science knowledge wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for Darwin. Highly recommend that as well. Number 5, Rainbow High, a book that is majestic and grandiose. For that, I am going with Song for the Blue Ocean by Carl Sarfina. This is a nonfiction book all about the majesty of our oceans. This is written by this gentleman, Carl Sarfina. He is the founder and director of the Living Oceans program for the National Audubon Society. And in this book, he talks about things like the tuna fishery in the Atlantic. He talks about salmon issues in the Pacific Northwest. He talks about whales. He talks about coral reefs in the Philippines, and all of these amazing, amazing species and habitats in our oceans that are under threat, either from pollution or from human development or other things. And it's just simply one of these kind of books that touches on a lot of different subjects and topics, but definitely very majestic, as our oceans are. And then last but not least, number 6, And the Money Kept Rolling In, an expensive or cheap book. So for that, I have chosen this nonfiction, Hearts in Atlantis by, it's not by Stephen King, but it has a section that's by Stephen King, and this is essays from Stephen King's college classmates and friends. This is a book that was published by the University of Maine Press, I believe. Yeah, the University of Maine Press, and it cost me $35 brand new. I do not normally purchase these sort of academic texts from university presses, but of course, being a huge Stephen King fan and being from Maine, when this book, I heard about this book, I don't even remember where I heard about it. I heard about it somewhere and I just had to have it. This publication, this was put out on the 50th anniversary of Stephen King's entrance to the University of Maine at Orono, which is our flagship university here in Maine. This was in the fall of 1966 when he started there, so you know, this is the accelerating time of the war in Vietnam, and lots of social upheaval was happening in the U.S., and so it has a section in here of a story that he wrote, Hearts in Atlantis, and which has to do with the Vietnam War, and then there's 12, I think, essays from people that he went to school with, sort of telling their experience of that time on that college campus. So yeah, I haven't read this one yet, but I just had to buy it, and at $35 is a hefty price to pay for a nonfiction book. So that is my little rundown of the Evita Book Tag. I will tag Doris from Aldi Books. I will tag Robert over at Barter Hordes, and I will tag Amy Anders. And I will link them all below, and I hope that you are interested in doing this tag. I think the questions are pretty fun, and I would love to hear your responses to them. I hope everybody's having a good day, and I will talk to you later.